Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to Season 4, Episode 62 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Nick, today I did not do my normal intro, as our normal intro can't really be done throughout the playoffs and the off season. But we're here to talk the playoffs, here to talk NFL playoffs, here to talk playoff fantasy. No matter the format that you guys play, whether it's a draft format, whether it's a select your roster and best roster wins kind of format, Nick does both. I only do the latter of that I host, and that's all I've ever done. I know NFL.com also has their own format, but there really is no app that has taken advantage of playoff fantasy formats like NFL.com, because there is such a drop-off of usage of players. But if you're in playoff fantasy, if you just want to hear about our predictions for the NFL playoffs, that's what we'll be talking about today.
Yeah, and we also know there's a lot of you out there that might do DFS for the postseason. There's a lot of DraftKings formats for like drafts with playoff fantasy. So there's still a lot to play for if you want to go throw some money into some football. There's still a few more weeks, and there's no way we're not going to take advantage of that opportunity. So as Nick mentioned, I do a draft league. My draft is on a Friday night. I think we're posting this on Friday, so it's later tonight. So yeah, I've got some fun to look forward to. Nick is hosting a league where you pick two lineups, unlimited players. You can pick whoever the hell you want within that format. So some fun stuff, some fun creative stuff for fantasy football. So let's take advantage.
If you're a first-time viewer or listener, this is the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast. Our schedule is a little bit different for the off-season, but during our regular season, we're pumping out 2 episodes a week plus a live show on weekends that will all return in a normal format during the 2025 fantasy football season. For now, during the off-season, we'll be giving you guys about 1 show a week or so to get some content out there for you guys. You can follow the show on social media, PrimeTime FF Pod, Twitter, PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast, Instagram. Subscribe to the show on YouTube or your favorite audio streaming platform. So we're talking playoffs here. It's wild card weekend. I think we have, I don't know how many games we have. I think we have a total of 6 games. I think it's 3 Sunday, 2 Saturday, 1 Monday. There's 2 college football playoff games we're recording on a Thursday night. So we have 2 of those. It's a great 5 days of football here to look forward to. And even if you're not playing playoff fantasy, there is stuff to look for in your next season of fantasy football, whether it's in any of these college football playoff games. There are college guys you're going to want to draft next year for the NFL playoffs. We've seen guys explode in the playoffs and have a big surge in draft capital during the next season of fantasy football. So there is a lot to look for. If you are a fantasy guy and if you just love the NFL, there's a lot to look forward to this weekend. So Nick, why don't we start with you first? You can pull up your playoff bracket here. So we each did a playoff bracket, and we each kind of talk about our brackets and talk about why this matters for playoff fantasy football in the formats that we at least play. So these are our official prediction brackets, by the way. These are not this has nothing to do with fantasy in terms of our bracket per se, but what we think that's going to happen in the bracket will affect our fantasy football decisions. So I will let Nick kind of go first and talk about his bracket for a minute or two.
Sure, I'll go through it pretty quickly. I had 2 different ideas for the bracket. I'm in another bracket challenge with another good one of my friends that we do. Just whoever gets the most right gets dinner. We decided to up it to 2, and this is one of them. This is the one I am most confident in, and this is what I truly believe will happen this postseason. I am very high on the Chargers, as I think a lot of people are. There are not a lot of people on the Texans. I think the Chargers very easily win that game. Clearly, Bills, Ravens, 2 big favorites, 2 big dogs. I actually think the Chargers have a very good shot at upsetting the Chiefs. I don't think there's that many teams that compete at quarterback, head coach, and defense as well as the Chargers can with the Chiefs. They already played twice this year. It's very hard to beat an NFL team 3 times in a singular season. So I think the Chargers are going to compete, but I am not betting against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes not getting to the conference championship. They have done that every single year that Patrick Mahomes has been a starter. We will never bet against that. Bills, Ravens, I think it's a coin flip game, but Josh Allen is the better quarterback to me. I like that opportunity, and I think home field advantage is going to matter a lot. And again, I think we do this every single year as we have for the last few seasons. We hype up the Bills, we hype up the Ravens, we hype up the Bengals. We say someone's going to overtake Kansas City, and it just does not happen. So I am going to bet on Kansas City going over and making it to the Super Bowl. On the other side of the bracket, this is where I got a little bit of a couple upsets in here. So I think the Commanders are very easily going to beat the Buccaneers. The best option for the Bucs obviously is Mike Evans, and he thought he could avoid Marshawn Lattimore for 2 games this year. It is not happening. He is back. He is healthy from his hamstring injury. Mike Evans is going to go up against him. He's been the one biggest kryptonite in his career. I think Jaden Daniels walks into Tampa as an underdog and wins a playoff game. I think that'll be a huge win for him. Eagles, it looks like Jalen Hurts is going to play. That's a report from today. We were recording Thursday night. I think very easily they're going to take care of the Packers. Packers got the big upset last year. I don't think they're going to be able to do it this year. And then I had the Rams over the Vikings. I went back and forth on this game. I'm sure a lot of people have. I think that the Rams are a different level team. They are coming off rest. Darnold and that team is coming off the biggest game of their careers. They're going to have to fly over to LA and might have to fly then again to Arizona because the game might be relocated because of the fires out there. We hope everybody, if we have any viewers out on the West Coast, are okay. But it's looking like that's going to be the tough spot. And the Rams at home, doesn't matter where it is. I think that the Rams are going to win that game. Kind of keep it quick. Lions, Eagles, very simply, 2 best teams in the NFC. I don't think anyone's going to the Super Bowl outside of that. I think it's a coin flip game, but I think the Eagles are healthier. They're a better defense. The Eagles are 9-0 this year when Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith all play. If all 3 are out there, they have not lost a game. You cannot put 8 in the box for Barkley. You have to defend those 2 receivers, and no team has been able to do it, and obviously that tush-push is effective. And very simply, in the Super Bowl, I think Kansas City, you do not bet against them. I think they pull off the 3-peat, and they do the what's never been done before, what I think a lot of people expect as the Super Bowl favorites. I'm pretty confident that's what's going to happen this year.
All right, we could scoot on over to my bracket now. We could break that down. So my bracket's not too much different from Nick's. I'll start from the top down here. I just think both 1 seeds are making it. I think it's very, very tough to get the 1 seed out in the NFL, especially now with the 1 seed getting the bye. If you look at the past decade, the 2 1 seeds have faced in the Super Bowl. I think it's 8 out of 10 times in the last decade or something like that. It's very, very hard. Last year, the Chiefs were, I guess, an outlier because they were the 3 seed, I'm pretty sure, but then they went in and wrecked everybody on the road. So the Chiefs have a lot of rest, but as long as they get to the AFC Championship, no team has proven to me that they can go into Kansas City and win, except for Joe Burrow's team. But the Chiefs did everything in their power to avoid that. Congratulations, guys! You avoided disaster, so congratulations on that. Bills Ravens is a real tough one for me to pick. I still haven't fully picked it in my head, but the Ravens won the first game. As long as Derrick Henry is healthy, the Bills have a terrible rush defense. If they run that offense through Derrick Henry, Tractor Cito is going to have a big game. And I'm not sure the Bills have the offensive pieces to compete. Now, the Ravens have a bad defense, too. They have a historically bad defense, actually. So that might come down to whoever gets the ball last. And me and Nick both somehow have the Commanders over the Bucs in an upset. That seems to be a popular one, but I think that game could also go either way. Our other major difference here is the Lions and the Eagles. Again, I favor the 1 seed, and I favor the fact that the Lions are, I believe, the 2nd highest scoring team of all time. I think they're right behind Peyton Manning's Broncos now. They did have a Week 17 game, so the stats are a little bit inflated, but they scored a lot of points this season. So I know they'll have time to get healthy. They have the bye week. They'll get Dave Montgomery back. We'll see if Aiden Hutchinson will make it back for the NFC Championship or even the Super Bowl. But I'm done betting against the Chiefs. I bet against them, legitimately bet against them 2 years ago against the Eagles, and I lost. I bet for them last year. I'm done betting against the Chiefs. As long as Patrick Mahomes is healthy and on the field, you need to give me a really good defense or a reason to bet against them. And as long as his line is healthy, that's the thing that knocked him down against the Bucs. So I also did pick the Vikings over the Rams. It's another coin flip one that I might go, back and forth on. So Nick, we could kind of flip back to your bracket now, and we could kind of bounce around brackets, I guess. You're in 2 different playoff formats. So how about you speak about the draft format? Where are you picking tonight? And how are you attacking that? Because I am not in a draft format. Again, there's only so many people that want to do a playoff fantasy format. So I do not have a draft format to play in.
So I'll give you a very basic rundown of the league. It is no bench. I believe it's team quarterback. So let's say Jalen Hurts did not play, even though it is trending towards him playing. Let's say he hypothetically did not play. I would get Tanner McKee / Kenny Pickett / Jalen Hurts throughout the entire course of the playoffs. So you pick a team quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, 1 tight end, 1 flex, team defense, team kicker. And basic PPR scoring, the same exact thing that you see in most of your leagues: 4 points per passing touchdown, 6 points per rushing, receiving, point per reception, all that kind of stuff. And you got no bench. So you got to predict who the players that you think will play well, and you need to predict the players that you think play the most amount of games. So based on my bracket, the only team that maximizes the opportunity and plays 4 games is the Philadelphia Eagles. So naturally, I am going to put more stock into them than I am any other team. Clearly, Kansas City as well going to the Super Bowl. That's 3 games. The Lions, I have at only 2. So the Lions, right now, if you were to go over, I'm actually going to pull it up on the screen real quick as we bounce around. This is Fantasy Pros. Fantasy Pros, one of the best sites for ranking players. This is their ECR, which is their expert consensus ratings. They have a bunch of experts that do rankings for the playoffs, for the regular season, week by week, whatever it is. And they pretty much form an average of this is what the rankings are based off these 100-something experts. And based on this, there's a lot of value on Jahmyr Gibbs at number 2, Amon-Ra at number 4, Jameson Williams at number 9. That's 3 Lions going within the top 10. That is very high value. For me, that means that pretty much I'm going to pass on them at that draft pick because I do not think they're going to play 3 games this postseason. I think they're only going to get 2 in there. So going back to the bracket, some other basic things for later in the draft. I really like the Commanders getting 2 games, who I'm sure a lot of people are not going to draft. If you avoid a quarterback, Jaden Daniels, I think, is a very good value as a mobile quarterback. It's one of the higher over-unders. The Commanders, Buccaneers, and if they play the Lions, we know any game with the Lions is going to be an over 50-point over-under. So just for some pretty quick values over there. Flipping back to the AFC, obviously, Bills, a lot of value with 3 games. Ravens only 2. The rest of them are either 2 or 1. So those are guys that I want to pretty much actively avoid, I guess, or guys that I want to steer away from. One of the things I always say in regular fantasy football, and something I've adopted over the last 2 years, if I have a tough decision, I'm going with the better offense for the player. For example, if it's a Miami Dolphin or Jacksonville Jaguar running back, let's say we're Devon Achane versus Travis Etienne, which happened this year, similar ADP in a lot of leagues, went Devon Achane. So as it applies to fantasy, I want the team that I think has the better offense if they're playing 2 games. So I do not think the Chargers have a better offense than the Rams or than the Commanders. So I'm going to lean on them a little bit more than I would on the other teams.
All right, we could bounce back to my bracket here, and we could kind of talk about the format that we both are in. So this, at least in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong here, maybe Nick has a different opinion, but the people that I know that play fantasy, playoff fantasy, this is the only format I've seen played. So it's done by hand and paper, and it's kind of best team takes all. So the roster I have here is 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, 2 flex, and a tight end. So our buy-in, you get 2 rosters, and the goal is to have the highest points total. So if you're selecting a bunch of Lions, like I am in a lineup, you're going to get zeros across the board for those lineups this week, but you're predicting that the Lions are going to play 3 games. And that's my goal here. My goal is that each player that I'm picking gets about 3 games and, throughout my lineup. So I personally have one lineup that's almost locked and loaded, and I call it my Super Bowl lineup. This is my Chiefs and Lions lineup. So I'm not going to get a lot of points this week at all. I do have 2 non-Chiefs and Lions here. So I have Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, who in this lineup, I'm predicting they're going to get 3 games and will have a lot of points within those 3 games. Aside from that, my other quarterback is Goff. I did choose Lamar over Mahomes for the reason of hoping that Lamar gets 3 games and hoping that Lamar outscores Mahomes within those 3 games. They cancel each other out. Then I have Goff here. I'm stacking up Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery for the reason of not liking any of the Chiefs running backs over Montgomery. And just in case Gibbs does get hurt, I'm not sure how many lineups will have Montgomery in it. I might have an ace in the hole there. Wide receivers, I'm also stacking up on the Lions here. Monroe St. Brown is a lock for this lineup, and I've thrown in Jamison Williams. The teams that I've seen win in this playoff format have had a couple of these glue guys to get to the Super Bowl. So Jamison Williams on my other flex next to Derrick Henry is Xavier Worthy, who has exploded in fantasy football over the past 6 to 8 weeks. A lot of short yardage touchdowns. And my tight end is Travis Kelce. I had to choose either Kelce or Laporta, and I just went with Kelce, Mr. Reliable. If they win the Super Bowl this year, I could see him retiring. So probably could have a big postseason. And then for team two, this is my Bills and Eagles team, my other Super Bowl matchup that I think could happen. So I've gone Allen and Hurts, Cook and Barkley. I've stacked up A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and then Khalil Shakir. And then I'm undecided on my flex and tight end. Right now I have my tight end as Mark Andrews, assuming he'll get 2 or 3 games. Obviously, in this lineup, Kelce would only play 2 games. Laporta would only play 2 games. And so would Mark Andrews. So I'm kind of banking on Andrews outscoring them. I haven't decided on my other flex. I don't want to double up on Derrick Henry, but I've thought about it. I'm a little worried picking between the Commanders and the Bucks. So I'm not sure I'll go with that other flex. Maybe Terry McLaurin, but I haven't decided that. So have you started constructing any of your teams within this format?
Yeah, so I've been playing around a little bit. I think I'm gonna have 2 different strategies, similar to you, but I think I'm gonna go a different route. So one of them I'm going to have being pretty much my Super Bowl prediction, which is the Chiefs and the Eagles. So I'm going to do one lineup that's very heavy on Kansas City and very heavy on the Eagles, definitely leaning a little bit more Eagles on that one. The sneaky play for me is I think is going to be Hollywood Brown, who has kind of not exploded, but been very reliable as a pass catcher. And if he gets 3 games with Patrick Mahomes in these big spots, Chargers, it'll either be Bills or Ravens, and then it'll be the Lions or the Eagles, 2 teams that play shootouts. I think he's got a lot of upside and clearly could break the game open. So that's going to be one of the strategies I do. The other one I think I'm going to do, and I'm not committed to it yet, is doing a Lions and Eagles team where I'm pretty much hedging that one of these 2 teams is going to the Super Bowl, which means that I'm getting a combined 6 games, which would be Lions play 3 and the Eagles play 3, or the Eagles play 4 and the Lions play 2. That's kind of the other route I'm thinking, because then you lock up Barkley and Gibbs. You could lock up Jalen Hurts. I'd probably go with like Josh Allen from the AFC as a quarterback in that lineup. I might switch that up, but I'm thinking about going that route where I pretty much hedge, because I think I feel like if I'm thinking about the brackets, the Eagles, the Lions, I think are honestly the only 2 teams that can make it out of the NFC. I think they're head and shoulders above the rest of the group. Maybe the Rams could be a sneaky upset, but I don't think that I would invest heavily in the Rams, because I'm not very confident they even beat the Vikings in round 1. Where on the AFC, I think there's 3 teams that could easily make it in the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens. So I'm very confident it's going to be a Lions-Eagles NFC championship game, assuming everybody's healthy. So I really am liking the idea of hedging, that you get a guaranteed 6 games from those 2 teams.
Yeah, I mean, your only issue there is that if you get the guaranteed 6 games, but then there will probably be somebody in there with a Chiefs Eagles or a Lions Bills or something.
Yeah.
The only way you're really going to win money at that point is most likely if there's some matchup that nobody picked. Maybe nobody picked Ravens Eagles for whatever reason. That's
or like if the Chargers got over the Chiefs in the second.
You need a really wacky one
Yeah.
there.
That's where I think I'd filter in like my flex might be Hollywood there, my quarterback might be Josh Allen. So but I think I'd go wide receiver, running back heavy in those 2.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think that's really all the advice I could give. My best advice really is pick a slew of guys that you think are going to play 3 games, and then for a flex or 2, sprinkle in some guys that you know will play at least 2 games, but get you a lot of points. Like Derrick Henry, I think is guaranteed for 2 games, and I think he's guaranteed for 2 good games. If you're only going to get 2 games out of somebody, I think you need 2 good games. So Lamar, Henry, and Allen are all fine to me if you only get 2 games out of them. If you're picking a guy like Khalil Shakir, then you have to go all Bills to me, because then you're hoping that they make the Super Bowl. So, Nick, I don't know if you have any other general advice, but that is a general advice I would have for people attacking these playoff formats.
I have two quick pieces of advice. One, definitely stack. I think stacking gives you an exponential opportunity. If you get the wide receiver that catches 2 or 3 touchdowns this postseason with that quarterback, it is much better than you can imagine for fantasy. It works a lot better in your regular fantasy leagues. Maybe you want to go the tight end quarterback combination. I think that's a good route to go. Another thing, don't just take a player because you think they'll have 3 to 4 games if they're not a good player. So, for example, do not, if you're in a draft type format or a DraftKings type format, I would absolutely not pull the trigger on like a Mac Hollins where he's going to get on the field and he's going to get time, but I don't trust he's going to get a ton of fantasy production. Even if he plays 4 games, maybe he combines for 25, 30 points, which is good, but I'd rather take a shot on a guy like Nico Collins, who I think can get 20 points in the first game. And if he wins, can maybe get you 20 in the next game. Like I would take the higher ceiling player with less games rather than taking that deep stretch for a guy later in your draft. Because at the end of the game, at the end of the day, it's about total points. I'd rather get a guy that could have 2 great games. You don't get the Bengals in this playoffs, but Jamar Chase is a great example. Like, if the Bengals snuck into the playoffs and upset the Bills in the first round and then lost to Kansas City, that Jamar Chase 2 games or those T. Higgins 2 games are a lot more valuable than a Mac Hollins 3 or 4 game run, or maybe not Jameson Williams isn't a good example, but you kind of get the gist. Maybe It is Hollywood Brown. There you go.
Yep. I think Pacheco is one that's dangerously shouldn't be touched.
I think he's going to get picked a lot of places, and I'm with you. I'm definitely.
I don't think he's healthy, so
that might get clipped as a horrible take in 3 or 4 weeks. But
it absolutely could. But I told people to bench Pacheco throughout the playoffs, and if you played him, he could have lost you a week. I don't think he eclipsed double-digit fantasy points since he's returned from his injury, and they still like Kareem Hunt there. So I think he needs touchdowns to score points, and they're using more Xavier Worthy in the red zone than Pacheco. So that would be my limit there. Is I'd rather Worthy over Pacheco. But that, again, that's why my lineup I've stacked up on Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery as my running backs. I like them both over Pacheco throughout the course of the playoffs. So. Alrighty, guys, that is our show heading into the wild card round. Hopefully this helped you. If you're in a playoff format, let us know what kind of format you're in and how we can help. If you're in a different playoff format that we haven't heard of, let us know, because we're always interested to hear a lot of these formats. And hopefully by this time next year, maybe Sleeper or some app has kind of picked up and instituted a format for the playoffs. So we are the Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast. If you enjoyed this show and you're listening on YouTube, make sure to drop a like on this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit that bell icon so you have notifications every time we drop a new video. If you'd rather listen to us on an audio streaming platform, if you're driving in the car, we're on iTunes, Spotify, anywhere that you get a podcast, you can get us the Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast. Give us that 5-star rating and a review. We're also on social media, Twitter, Primetime FF Pod, Facebook, Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast, and Instagram, also Primetime Fantasy Football Pod. Thank you guys for your support. We'll talk to you guys very soon.